Hatisham 3. There's a specific kind of bewilderment that only cat owners know. It's not the loud, dramatic confusion of something going wrong. It's quieter than that, more like the feeling of witnessing something you can't quite file away. You're half asleep, the room is dark, the whole house has been still for hours. And then, without any warning, your cat detonates. Full speed, absolute commitment. Running what sounds like relay laps through your apartment at a pace that seems physically improbable for an animal who was just moments ago a warm, motionless lump on the end of your bed. You didn't move, nothing changed, and yet here she is, ricocheting off furniture in the dark like she's being chased by something only she can see. Most cat owners have a private catalog of these moments. The 2:47 a.m. sprint down the hallway. The inexplicable leap from the bathroom counter to the floor and back again. The sound, and it's always the sound that gets you, of small, dense paws hitting hardwood at a speed that genuinely seems impossible for a creature that size. Some people find it funny. Some find it endearing. Some lie there in mild, bleary-eyed bewilderment, waiting for it to stop. Almost everyone has filmed it at some point. And almost everyone, at some point, has typed some version of "Why does my cat go crazy at night?" into a search bar, usually at 3 a.m., usually while it was actively happening. The answer most people find goes something like this: cats are nocturnal, so they have more energy at night. Maybe you've come across that explanation. Maybe it even satisfied you, briefly. It's the kind of answer that sounds complete, tidy, sensible, easy to repeat, and it's not technically incorrect. But here's what it doesn't explain. Why does the energy release with that specific intensity? Why does it arrive in a burst rather than a gradual restlessness? Why does your cat go from completely at rest to absolutely unhinged in less than a second and then return to stillness just as fast? The nocturnal explanation describes when. It doesn't come close to explaining what or why, and the gap between those two things, between when and what's actually happening, is where the real story lives. Because what's unfolding in your hallway at 3 a.m. isn't random. It isn't a glitch or a quirk or just one of those inexplicable cat things you chalk up to their general mysteriousness and move on from. It's a precise, ancient, beautifully organized biological event. The chaos is an illusion. Beneath it is a system, one that's been running inside cats for millions of years, long before your apartment existed, long before you existed, and it is doing exactly what it was built to do. The shock isn't in how strange it looks. The shock is in how deliberate it actually is. Think for a moment about the version of your cat that exists outside your home. Not your specific cat, but the animal she comes from. Small, precise, extraordinarily efficient, built to hunt. Not occasionally, not when convenient, but consistently, repeatedly, every single day. The wild ancestors of your domestic cat hunted multiple times in a 24-hour period, not because they were aggressive, but because that's the engine their entire physiology was constructed around. Every reflex, every sensory system, every burst of energy in their body was organized toward one repeating purpose: find prey, stalk it, chase it, catch it. That engine didn't disappear when cats moved indoors. It's still running. It runs in your cat right now, even as she naps on your couch in a patch of afternoon sunlight. What changes in a domestic environment is what that engine has to work with. There's no prey. There are no real chases with real stakes. There are toys sometimes. There are birds through the window. There are dust motes and shadows and the occasional errant bug. Your cat engages with all of it. You've probably watched her stalk a hair tie across the kitchen floor with the same focused, unblinking intensity a wild cat brings to an actual hunt. And that's not a coincidence. That's the system activating. But here's the thing about a system that activates all day, in small ways, without ever fully completing its cycle. The energy it generates has to go somewhere. It doesn't dissolve. It doesn't evaporate. It accumulates, quietly, like water filling a container, until the container reaches a point where it simply has to release. That release has a name. Feline behaviorists call it a frenetic random activity period, or FRAP, but the name is almost beside the point. What matters is what it is, the body's pressure valve, opening all at once. Not a reaction to something external, not a response to a sound or a smell or something you did or didn't do. An internal release, an outward expression of something that has been building in your cat's nervous system over hours, finally finding an exit. And when it finds that exit, it doesn't trickle out. It doesn't ease out gradually. It exits the way compressed energy always does, when it's finally given space, completely, immediately, and with a ferocity that looks, from the outside, like something has gone very wrong with your cat. Nothing has gone wrong. That's the first thing to hold on to. But understanding why the release happens at 3 a.m. specifically, why that hour, why that intensity, why that eerie combination of total commitment and sudden stillness, requires going somewhere that most explanations never bother to take you. It requires going back much further than last night, further than your apartment, further even than domestication, because the answer isn't in your cat's history with you. It's in something far older than that, something that was written into her body long before the two of you ever found each other. Inside your cat, there is a behavioral arc that has existed for millions of years. Feline behaviorists describe it as the predatory motor sequence, and while that phrase sounds clinical, what it describes is anything but. It's a story, really. A complete, structured story that your cat's nervous system is trying to tell every single day. It begins with stillness and focused attention, the stalk. It moves into pursuit, the chase. Then the catch, the bite, the brief, decisive moment of completion. And then, almost tenderly, it winds down. Grooming, stillness, sleep. Beginning, middle, end. A full arc. Your cat isn't just wired to hunt. She's wired to complete something. And that distinction matters more than almost anything else in understanding what happens at 3 a.m. Here's where the indoor life creates something most people never think about. Your cat moves through versions of this arc every single day, but almost never completes it. She watches the bird on the windowsill, body low, pupils wide, tail making that slow, involuntary sweep. That's the stalk. She explodes after the ribbon toy, catches it, bites down. That's the chase and catch. But then the toy goes limp, the bird flies away, the moment dissolves. The arc never closes. And your cat's nervous system, which was fully committed to that sequence, which had mobilized genuine biological resources to see it through, is left holding unresolved energy with nowhere to put it. This happens multiple times a day. Each incomplete cycle adds to what's already there. By evening, the accumulation is real, and it is looking for resolution. Think of it less like a battery running low and more like a pressure system building. Each interrupted hunt cycle, each moment of arousal without release, adds pressure. Your cat handles it gracefully for most of the day. She redirects, she rests, she finds small outlets. But there's a threshold. And when the quiet of the late evening arrives, when the household settles and the stimulation drops and the environment stops offering distractions, the pressure doesn't drop with it. It peaks. Because here's something that surprises most people. Cats are not purely nocturnal. The more precise word is crepuscular, meaning their nervous system is naturally tuned to peak activity at dawn and dusk, the transitional hours when small prey animals are most exposed and most active. Not midnight, not 3 a.m. specifically, but in a home with artificial light irregular schedules and afternoons full of near hunts that never complete, that natural peak shifts. It shifts because your cat's internal clock is responsive. Feline behaviorists have observed that domestic cats are remarkably adaptable in their activity rhythms, often adjusting to the schedules of the households they live in. If your evenings are active and your nights are quiet, your cat's nervous system learns that. The late-night stillness becomes the signal. The moment the environment finally goes calm enough for the accumulated pressure to surface without competition. So when the house goes dark and silent, and you've been asleep for an hour, and everything is still, that's not when your cat randomly decides to sprint. That's when the conditions finally align for the release that's been waiting all day. The timing isn't random. It's calibrated to the rhythm of your home. And the release itself, the Zoomie, that breathtaking, slightly unhinged full-speed sprint through your darkened hallway, is not chaos, it's completion. Your cat's body is finishing, in the only way available to it, the arc it was built to complete. The stalk already happened, somewhere between watching the shadows move and tracking a sound in the wall. The chase is happening now, at full speed, through the territory she knows by heart. The catch and the bite, those happen against the carpet, the corner of the couch, the air itself, and then it's over. The arc closes. The pressure releases. She sits in the middle of the hallway, slightly wide-eyed, and begins to groom. That grooming isn't random either. Grooming is how the predatory sequence ends. She is, in the most literal biological sense, finishing her hunt. What that means for your cat is something worth sitting with for a moment. The animal sharing your home is carrying, every day, the full weight of an ancient and intricate biological system, one that evolved over millions of years in an environment that no longer exists for her. She can't hunt. She doesn't need to. But the system doesn't know that. It activates anyway, builds anyway, seeks completion anyway. And in the absence of real prey, it finds its resolution in the only place it can, in the familiar geography of your home, in the quiet dark, in a sprint that probably looks to you like sheer absurdity. It isn't absurdity. It's one of the most honest things your cat does all day, her body doing exactly what her body was made to do, in the space you gave her to do it in. There's something else feline behaviorists have noted that's worth knowing here. Cats who experience more complete play sessions during the day, sessions that actually follow the arc through from stalk to catch to the wind down, tend to have fewer, shorter, and less intense episodes of nocturnal FRAP. Not always, not as a guaranteed equation, but the pattern holds often enough that it's become a consistent recommendation from veterinary behaviorists. An intentional evening play session, one that actually lets the sequence run, can change the texture of your cat's nights. This matters, but not for the reason most people assume. It isn't about managing a problem. It's about something quieter and more interesting than that, which we'll come back to in a moment. Because here's what that observation quietly implies. You are not a passive audience to your cat's 3 a.m. performances. You are, without perhaps realizing it, part of the system. The way your evenings unfold, the play that happens or doesn't happen, the rhythms of your shared space, the rituals you've built together without naming them. All of it shapes the pressure system in ways that most cat owners never connect back to that midnight sprint. What your cat does during the Zoomies, and especially what she does immediately after them, is telling you something very specific. Something about how she feels in your home. Something about where you sit in her world. And that's where this gets genuinely interesting. There's a version of this story that gets told sometimes, in forums, in comment sections, in well-meaning articles, that frames the midnight Zoomie as a red flag, a sign of anxiety, evidence that something is wrong. And to be fair, context always matters. A cat who is hyperactive, restless, and unable to settle across the whole of her day may be communicating something that deserves attention. And a conversation with a veterinarian or feline behaviorist is always worth having if a pattern genuinely concerns you. But the nighttime FRAP of an otherwise content cat, the classic explosive, brief, and completely self-contained 3 a.m. sprint, is almost never anxiety wearing a disguise. Conflating the two doesn't just cause unnecessary worry. It causes people to misread one of the most quietly revealing things their cat does. Feline behaviorists have observed something that runs directly counter to the anxiety interpretation. Cats engage in full, uninhibited FRAP almost exclusively in environments where they feel genuinely secure. Think about what a cat does when she is actually frightened, or chronically stressed, or uncertain about her territory. She doesn't run joyfully through the dark at full speed. She shrinks. She hides in the highest or most concealed space available. She moves carefully, close to walls, with her body low and her senses on full alert. The wide-open, full-commitment midnight sprint is the behavioral opposite of that. It requires a cat who feels so safe in her territory, so certain of every inch of the space around her, that she can surrender completely to the release without a single thread of vigilance holding her back. That's what the Zoomie actually is, seen clearly, a confidence display. Not performed for anyone, not directed outward. Just a cat moving through a world she trusts at a speed that only makes sense when you have zero fear of what's in the dark. She knows where every piece of furniture is. She knows the sound of the house settling. She knows the smell of each room, the texture of each surface, the exact distance between the couch and the hallway. This territory is hers. She has claimed it, learned it, mapped it at a cellular level. And the midnight sprint is her body expressing that ownership in the most unguarded way imaginable. It is not a cat losing control. It is a cat who feels free enough to be completely, entirely. Now here is the layer that tends to land quietly but stay with people for a long time. Many cats don't sprint through empty space. They sprint toward something. Feline ethologists have noted that cats frequently time their FRAP episodes to moments when their person is home, and often route their midnight runs through or directly past the room where their human is sleeping. The easy interpretation is that they're being disruptive, or that the movement simply follows the most open path. But the more considered interpretation, and the one that holds up under closer behavioral observation, is that proximity-seeking and play arousal are not separate systems in your cat. They're intertwined. She is not ignoring you during the Zoomies. In her way, in the language her body speaks, she is including you. And then watch what she does when it stops. The sprint ends. The house goes quiet again. Your cat sits for a moment, sometimes grooming, sometimes just still. Catching her breath in the particular way cats catch their breath, which looks almost identical to simply existing. And then, in many cases, she comes to find you. She appears at your bedroom door. She jumps onto the bed and settles somewhere near you, not necessarily touching, but close. Or she sits in the doorway and looks at you with that slow, unhurried blink. That moment, that quiet return, is not random. Feline behaviorists describe it as a return to the safe base. The hunt is complete. The pressure is released, and the place she comes back to, the place that represents safety and stillness is home in her nervous system, is wherever you are. You are her anchor point, the place the arc ends. There's a counterintuitive truth worth sitting with here, one that genuinely surprises most people when they first encounter it. A cat who never gets Zoomies isn't automatically a calmer or more settled cat. The absence of FRAP can sometimes reflect something quieter and less comfortable. A cat who is understimulated, whose predatory arc never builds enough energy to release. Or, more significantly, a cat who doesn't feel free enough in her territory to let go completely. The Zoomie requires a kind of full-body surrender to the moment. A cat living with chronic low-level stress, or in an environment that doesn't feel entirely safe, may suppress that release because she can't afford the vulnerability of it. The presence of Zoomies, annoying as they are at 3 a.m., can be one of the quieter signals that your cat is genuinely, deeply comfortable in the life she has. For those of you with more than one cat, there's an additional layer that tends to produce a particular kind of delight when people first notice it. Synchronized Zoomies, 2 or more cats suddenly erupting into full-speed activity at the same moment, moving through the house in what looks like a choreographed chase with rules only they understand, are something feline behaviorists often interpret as a form of social bonding. The cats are not competing. They are not chasing each other out of aggression or territorial tension. They are, in some sense, that mirrors very old instincts, playing a shared game. The same ancient sequence that runs in solitary cats runs between them together, the compressed energy releasing in concert, the sprint becoming something communal. If you've watched 2 of your cats tear through the house at 3 a.m. in what looks like pure synchronized chaos, you may have been watching something closer to intimacy than you realized. Pull back from all of it for a moment. The sprint, the timing, the territory, the return to you afterward. Seen together, what you're looking at is a cat who is safe enough to run wild in the dark, bonded enough to loop back to you when it's over, and comfortable enough in the home you've built together to let her oldest instincts surface without interference. Every single 3 a.m. Zoomie in a content and healthy cat is the sound of an animal who is thriving, not in spite of the life she lives with you, because of it. And what you do in the moments around that midnight sprint, both before it happens and after, turns out to matter in ways that go much deeper than simply getting more sleep. The instinct most people have when woken at 3 a.m. by thundering paws and the sound of something skidding across the floor is completely understandable. You call out. Maybe you get up. Maybe on a particularly exhausted night, you shut the bedroom door or redirect her with some mild exasperation. And none of that makes you a bad cat owner. It makes you a human being who needs sleep. But it's worth knowing that scolding or confining a cat during a FRAP episode doesn't stop the pressure from building. It just interrupts the release. The energy that didn't discharge at 3 a.m. doesn't disappear. It waits. The arc that didn't complete will look for another moment to complete. What you're responding to in those midnight sprints isn't a behavior that needs correcting. It's a biological need that's looking for a better outlet, and you can actually help create one. The most effective thing feline behaviorists consistently recommend isn't a change in how you respond to the Zoomies. It's a change in what happens a few hours before them. An intentional evening play session, one that genuinely follows the shape of the predatory arc, not just 5 minutes of dangling a toy, can shift the entire texture of your cat's nights. Use something that moves the way prey moves. A wand toy, a feather that darts and pauses and darts again. Something that lets her stalk before she chases, and chase before she catches. Let the sequence build. Let her actually catch it at the end, hold it, bite down on it. That final catch matters more than most people realize. It's the moment the arc begins to close, and the nervous system begins its quiet descent from arousal back toward stillness. After the play session ends, timing a small meal can deepen that descent further. Feline behaviorists and nutritionists have both noted that feeding after active play mirrors the natural sequence your cat's body expects: hunt, catch, eat, groom, sleep. When that sequence completes in the evening, when the arc runs all the way through to its natural end, the pressure that would otherwise build toward a midnight release has already found its resolution. Some cat owners find this single shift makes a noticeable difference in the frequency and intensity of nocturnal FRAP, not as a guaranteed fix, not as a formula, but as an act of speaking your cat's language fluently enough that her body gets what it needs before the house goes dark. And here is where the full picture comes together, the thing the title was quietly promising from the beginning. The reason your cat gets the Zoomies at 3 a.m. is not because she's chaotic. It's not because she's broken, or poorly adjusted, or indifferent to your sleep. It's because she carries inside her a system that is ancient and intact and precise, a system that was built for a world of real hunts and real prey and wide-open territory. And she lives that system out in the space you gave her, in the quiet of your home, in the dark hours when everything else is still. That is the shocking reason. Not alarming, not something to fix. Something to stand in front of for a moment and genuinely marvel at. Because what you're witnessing, every single time it happens, is millions of years of elegant biological architecture expressing itself in your hallway. Think about the cat who appears at your bedroom door after the sprint ends. She's caught her breath, she's groomed, or she's about to. And she comes to find you, not because you called her, not because you have food, not because she needs anything from you in any transactional sense. She comes because you are her safe base, the place the arc returns to, the stillness at the center of her world. A cat who doesn't feel that, who doesn't have that anchor, that bond, that depth of comfort with another living being, doesn't come back to find them after the hunt. She just disappears back into the dark. The cat who appears at your door and blinks at you slowly in the low light is telling you something she has no other words for. She ran wild and she came back to you. That's not nothing. That is, in the quiet language of cats, everything. People who don't have cats sometimes say that cats don't really need anyone, that they're indifferent to their humans, that the relationship is convenient rather than chosen. You've probably heard some version of that. And what's interesting, what this whole, layered, surprisingly complex story of the 3 a.m. Zoomie reveals, is that the evidence runs in exactly the opposite direction. Your cat doesn't sprint joyfully through her territory in the dark because she's alone in it. She does it because she's safe in it. And she's safe in it because of you, because of the home you've created together, the rhythms you share, the trust that's been built in the quiet accumulation of ordinary days. The Zoomie is not despite the bond, it exists because of it. So the next time you're lying awake at 2:58 a.m. and you hear the first soft thud of a cat dropping from somewhere she probably shouldn't have been, followed by the gathering momentum of paws, moving faster and faster down the hallway. You don't have to lie there in bewildered resignation. You can lie there knowing what you're actually hearing. You're hearing an ancient system completing itself. You're hearing a cat who feels free. You're hearing the sound of an animal who trusts her territory, who trusts the dark, who trusts the home she lives in deeply enough to let go completely, even for just 2 minutes at 3 a.m. when the rest of the world is asleep. That sound is not an inconvenience. Heard clearly, it's something closer to a privilege. If this kind of decoding, taking something that looks like ordinary cat behavior and finding what's actually living underneath it, is something you want more of, there's a lot more here to explore together. Your cat has an entire language she's been speaking around you, quietly every day. The way she positions herself in a room, the specific moment she chooses to come close, the things her eyes are doing when she watches you from across the space. Each of those moments has a depth to it that most people never get to see. Not because it's hidden exactly, but because no one ever handed them the key. Subscribe if you want to keep finding those keys. The next video is already waiting, and what it uncovers might make you look at your cat very differently the next time she simply sits and watches you from across the room.